Hello everyone, my name is Mike Flack and I'm a volunteer for Wise Up Financial Education, and today I'm going to be talking about flat sharing and how you can live more affordably. Now, before we even go into flat sharing, I want to pose a question to you. I want you to write down your thoughts on flat sharing. Get yourself a piece of scrap paper, or you can even just use your notes on your phone. But I just want you to write down or type down the good, the bad, the ugly thoughts that you have with regards to flat sharing. If you want to pause the video here and give yourself 5 minutes to do that, that's absolutely fine. But I think give yourself a minute just to write down your immediate thoughts. Once we've done that, we're now going to cover what we're going to look at today. So today we're going to look at the overview of the process, the basics, type of tenancies, legalities, responsibilities and rights, coping with flatmates, and of course one of the most important areas, moving out. So the actual overview of the process of being within a flat share is the first step, which is looking for houses that fit your group. You need to decide, are you going to be flat sharing with a group of friends, or are you actually going to go out and look for yourself a house that you can maybe share with existing flatmates? Once you've decided, you then need to do your viewing. You need to make sure that the house fits you properly, that you're going to get on quite well with your other flatmates. Maybe check out the area, make sure that there's nothing that might make you a bit unsettled when you're staying there. But the viewing is one of the most important things, because you need to bear in mind this is a place that you are probably going to be staying in for at least a year. Once you've done the viewing, you've then got to deal with the legal stuff. So you need to pay the required amounts on time and sign the contract. And this is something that we're going to talk about a bit later on in the presentation. But before you even get involved in looking at flat sharing, do make sure that you've got all the financials in place, because the legal stuff can be a bit of a headache at times. Once you've done all the hard stuff, live, enjoy, and just really embrace the experience, especially if it's your first time flat sharing. And do take care of the people and the place in which you're staying, because you have to remember you're sharing this space with other people as well. And then finally, as I mentioned, the moving out period, making sure that you leave the house in the way in which you found it, because there's some areas where you can lose a bit of money, especially when you move out. And that's why there's an importance of taking an inventory. But we'll talk about that later. So, getting the basics in place first. Deciding who you want to live with. Do you want to live with friends? Do you want to go and move in with a group of people that maybe are already living in a flat share? That's your decision as to what you want to do. All I will say on this is that do be prepared over your time at university that, say for example, you're flat sharing with some friends, or you're flat sharing with maybe your boyfriend or your girlfriend, that over time you will have some disagreements. And if you're flat sharing and you're with that person and it goes a bit rocky, you don't really want to end up ruining friendships. So just have a little think about that before you decide fully on who you want to live with. Once that's been decided, you need to think about who your guarantor will be. Now, a guarantor is someone who basically, if you have any problems, that could be paying the bills, it could be paying the rent, that's the person that's going to be able to support you in that situation. So usually you'll have one guarantor per person if you're solo, and you have one guarantor per group in a joint tenancy. Once you've done that, you then need to make sure that you have enough money. Have you got enough money for the deposit, the first month's rent, and essential living items? You will be expected to pay the deposit and the first month's rent right from the off, or usually you are. So please make sure that you've got all the money in place to make sure that you can fulfill those obligations from the off, because you don't want to get off on the wrong foot. Now, the types of tenancies, we have two of these. You have a single sole tenancy and a joint tenancy. But what are the difference? Well, the single sole tenancy, bills are included in rent, so you do have a higher rent. You have to own a TV license. And please don't think that that's a minor thing. A TV license is really, really important, because you can get in some serious trouble if you don't have a TV license. If you have any issues or any problems, you have to report those to the landlord. When you leave, you have to give a notice period. So if you decide that this isn't the place for you and you want to move out, you have to give the notice period to the landlord. And usually that's agreed before you actually even move in with regards to that notice period. But the thing that you have to realise is when you're in a single cell tenancy, it can be lonely if the flatmates aren't that good. So we're talking about if, say, for example, you've moved into a flat share, especially with people that you don't really know. That's why the viewing is really, really important. But of course, sometimes on a first viewing, you're not even going to really fully understand what the other flatmates are like. So do be prepared that sometimes you might not get on that well with your flatmates. And if that's the case, it can feel quite lonely. The joint tenancy, that's when you're with your group of friends, for example. You have one person's name on the bills. You have one TV license per group. You solve flatmate issues internally. And you give a notice period of fine replacements together as a group. And finally, you also need to realise that just like flatmates, when you're single in a sole tenancy, aren't always good, your friends are not always good as well. Remember what I said earlier, sometimes you do run into some difficulties. I would personally say that both are good and both are, they have their negatives as well. But this is something that you have to be comfortable with before you even proceed with wanting to do a flat share. So do take the time to have a little think about this before you move forward. The legal stuff when you move in, the wonderful inventory is the first thing that I want to talk about here. Now, the inventory will be provided to you by the landlord and the agent. Please make sure that you cover this. I've only just recently moved into a flat myself, and I noticed that I've basically taken over a flat that has lots of scuff marks, problems, etc. And I needed to make sure they were all in the inventory, because if that wasn't included in the inventory, I will be paying a lot of money when it's time for me to move out. Double check everything on the inventory. I'm saying that twice because if you're not following that, that could really come back to bite you in the future. So please follow my advice on that one. If you see anything that isn't in the inventory, you must highlight it immediately. Landlords and agents, from my experience, are pretty good with this. They usually give you the opportunity to say, well, hang on, I've noticed there's a little issue above the door, or maybe the light's not working properly. Basically highlight absolutely anything, and don't think you're being picky. Tell them, because what you don't want is them to come back in a few months' time to say, well, hang on a minute, this wasn't on the inventory, so you've caused the damage, because that can be quite painful for you, and also can be quite disappointing to hear that from your landlord or your agent. When you move in, use the camera phone to take lots of photo evidence. So if you see something again you're not happy with, take the picture, store it, and send it through to your agent and landlord, especially if it's not already included on the inventory. And remember, once you've signed off in the inventory, that is you confirming that this is the starting state of the flat that you've just inherited by yourself or with your friends. So make sure that everything is perfect when you move forward. And when I say perfect, I mean they understand if there's any problems within the flat, or you've highlighted any problems with the flat before you've signed off on that inventory. So the inventory's done, you're moving in. The deposit, sometimes you actually have to pay the deposit before the inventory, and that's why the viewing is so important, because you want to look around everywhere before you settle that deposit or put that deposit down. But usually you have to pay 1 month's or 5 weeks rent for your deposit. This is stored in a government-backed tenancy deposit scheme, and that should not be touched until you move out. If that is, you've got a big problem there, that needs to be highlighted, but that should not be touched before you move out. Your landlord and agent should send evidence of this within 30 days of moving in. That's a legal requirement, so you must be told that that has been stored in a government-backed tenancy deposit scheme, and you should have evidence of that. And likewise, if there is any problems with the deposit, so say for example you're leaving and that deposit is having to be touched due to any problems within the flat, again, that all needs to be notified, it all needs to be documented. Nothing should be happening with that deposit without you knowing. Finally, The most enjoyable bit actually is signing the contract, because it means all of the pre-stuff is now done, it's finished. It's not legal required, but it's highly recommended. I would suggest that you do actually look to make sure that you sign a contract. The contract should have your names of you, your group, the landlord and the agent. All of that should be on there. The contract term time, the rental amount, the deposit amount, and the responsibilities of all parties. I know it's very easy for us to skim through the responsibilities of all parties because we just want to get the contract signed and moved in. But what I would say is that you will need to make sure that you're understanding everything, the expectations of your landlord and what they want you to do. Because if there's anything that you've seen there that you do not understand, or if there's anything that you've missed and then you end up breaking one of the clauses, again, it can be very painful in the future. So read your responsibilities properly. Some of the key responsibilities, and this is to help you with regards to responsibilities and understanding them, is paying the rent and the bills on time. Please do this. Do not run the risk of missing that once. Even if you miss that once, you're in a serious bother. Is maybe a little bit extreme, but it's really not pleasant, because you get people not trusting you with your bills and your rent, and depending on where you're living and who you're renting from, they can be quite pushy. So you need to make sure that you pay your rent and your bills all on time. Repair your damages. There are going to be little scuff marks and things like that when you're staying in a flat. My current flat, there's scuff marks everywhere, but I will make sure when it's time to leave, I repair all of those scuff marks. If it means just getting a bit of paint or making sure that everything is covered or recovered, I will be making sure that that happens, because you do not want to leave it in a worse state than you inherited it. Keep your flat clean. You want to make sure that that's fully clean. Don't forget, your landlord and the agent can come and inspect. They have to give you 24 hours notice, but they can come and inspect the apartment to make sure that it's being looked after. So please keep it clean. It is really embarrassing if they come round and it looks like a complete tip. So please make sure that's clean. Keep it secure. You've got valuables in there. They will have some valuables that are still in there. Could be with furniture, could be a number of things that could be in there. You want to make sure it's secure. But really, really important, do not sublet. For you, those that do not know what subletting is, let's say, for example, you and your mates, you're all renting a flat, you've got a spare room in there, and someone turns around and says, oh, I've got a great way of making some extra money. Let's rent out the room at the end and we can make £1,000 a month between us and we could split that down. That's subletting. That is illegal. Do not do that. You can get in trouble. If you want to sublet, which is something personally I would avoid, especially if it's your first time renting, just enjoy the experience of renting instead of getting involved in all of that. But say, for example, that's an idea that you want to proceed with, you must speak to your landlord, and the likelihood is your landlord will say no. But if your landlord says yes, get that permission in writing. Do not let your landlord say, yeah, sounds like a great idea, that's fine. You and the guys, or you and your group of friends have a nice group, you can keep the rent from that. If they say it verbally, do not do it. You want it in writing before you can actually look at subletting. But I would say follow the bullet point here. Don't even bother getting involved in that. Do not sublet, because you can get into a lot of trouble with that. It is illegal if you have no permission from the landlord. And finally, if in doubt, ask permission and return it as you got it, or even better. Like I say, the flat I'm in at the moment, I'm going to make sure that flat is looking like almost brand spanking new when I leave, because I want to make sure that I get all of my deposit back, and I want to make sure that I have, keep myself in the good books, so to speak, because you never know when you're going to use the agent or potentially the landlord again. The rights are really important as well. You have rights your landlord has rights, your agent has rights. You must have the contact details of the agent, especially if it's the agent that you're dealing with, or the landlord. You must be able to have contact with them. If there is a contact from them that they want to come and see, and remember I said this earlier, they can come and check your apartment to make sure that it's not being used in the wrong way, or they might just want to have a random checkup, which is absolutely fine. They must, however, give you 24 hours notice before entering, unless it's in case of an emergency. If there's something that's an emergency, then they can come in. But if they, otherwise, they must give you 24 hours notice. They are not allowed to knock on the door whilst you and your friends, for example, sitting having dinner and randomly say they want to come in and have a look. That's not a goer. Do not allow that. They must give you 24 hours notice. Your rights as well. The conditions of the house, the furniture must be livable. Again, so important that you do the viewing. Because if you go in the viewing, you will see what the state of the house is. And I'm not being funny. If the house or the flat or wherever you're staying is not looking livable, don't even touch it. That's what I would do. But that's down to you, obviously, with what you want to do. But for me, if it's not looking livable, it's causing yourself more hassle. It must meet safety regulations. Depending on where you're living, I mean, you could be living in a place that has, gas cooker, things like that. You want to make sure that all of that is livable. You want to make sure that everything that you've got there matches or hits the safety regulations that you should be having within that flat or with that accommodation in which you're flat sharing. Your agent and landlord must leave you in peace. Okay. They're not allowed to threaten you, obviously. They're not allowed to open your mail, and they're not allowed to go through your possessions. So if they come in to want to have a look around, absolutely fine. They've given you 24 hours notice, no problem, in you come. But they're not allowed to go through your possessions. They're not allowed to use threatening language. All of that is an absolute no-go. I actually think as well, it's important that your landlord must leave you in peace. I have heard from some friends where landlords are giving the 24 hours notice, coming round, having a chat, wanting to have a meal with the group, have dinner, which sounds all really nice and fun. Personally, for me, it's not a great mix to have that kind of relationship with a landlord. Of course, you can have a respectable, friendly relationship with your agent or landlord, but not to the fact where they're your new best friends. Because at the end of the day, you are renting that place from them. That's your area. That's your independence and your privacy. And I just think mixing that with landlord and agent and allowing them into that space is not really good in my books. But that's just me. Some people have really good relationships with their landlords, in the sense that they come around for dinner and stuff like that. But for me, there's a line there. But again, that's down to your personal preference. Coping with flatmates. This is something that can be quite difficult, especially if it's your first time flat sharing. You've been at uni, first year's gone absolutely great. Hey, let's go and flat share. That sounds brilliant, but you need to understand and respect each other's needs. That is so important. When it comes to chores, there's always one that doesn't want to do the chores, or there's always one that just kind of thinks everyone else will do it. Create a rota. I'll do Tuesday night cooking, you do Wednesday night cooking, but I'll do the washing up on a Wednesday night, you do the washing up on a Tuesday, Thursday night will be takeaway night, those kind of things. Do a rota. It's quite fun actually sometimes if you do a rota. That sounds really nerdy, but it can be quite fun, especially takeaway night. It's great. Bill payments, that is super important, especially if you're doing that joint tenancy and someone's name is on the bill payments. You need to make sure that person is as trustworthy with anything. You need to trust them 150%, okay? And the reason I say that is because if they miss a bill payment, or if they're in a situation where they cannot pay the bills, that is going to really affect your group, and you do not want that. You need to make sure that you trust them 100%. Okay. Shared groceries. Make sure everyone chips in. Don't be the one that doesn't chip in for groceries. No one likes that. So make sure that everyone shares the groceries. Personally, I would actually do a menu, like a little menu to at the beginning of the week, and maybe sit down. It depends how close you are, your mates, but I would sit down and do a little menu. Monday night spag bowl, Tuesday night chili con carne. I'm hitting the beef there. But once you get your menu together, then you can go out and do your groceries. Parties and guests, we all like a party. Uni is obviously the time of partying, fantastic, but do be aware you don't want parties going on morning, noon and night, because not everyone's going to like it, especially your neighbours. So if you're going to have a party and guests, be polite. Let everyone know that there's going to be a party with some guests, and be respectable. Don't have a party where you're blaring music until 3 a.m, 4 a.m. No one's going to like that, and you're not going to be popular, and then that makes the whole living there for the year really uncomfortable. So just, it's fine to have parties and guests, obviously, want you to enjoy it, but make sure if you're doing that, be polite. It is okay before you have a party to speak to people, your neighbours, your fellow flatmates, and say, tonight I'm going to have, a few people round. When it hits 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, we're going to have some music. We'll turn it down around that time, or we're going to head out. But, I'm going to have some people round. Is that all right? That's the respectable thing to do. So, don't not do that, because that's an easy way not to make friends, just to invite people around without telling people. And finally, I am going to say it, the top tip is to have flat meetings. A few of you are going to hear that and say, oh no, not flat meetings. You sound really nerdy, Mike, for saying that. But flat meetings are okay. You can have flat meetings. Once a week, in the flat, down the pub, wherever you want to go, have a flat meeting. Talk about anything that's, what's going well at the moment, guys. What are we liking at the moment? Are we liking Mike's menus that he does? Or what's not going well? I don't like the fact that the dishwasher does not get unloaded every morning, and it's always down to me to do it. Can we do a rota? Can we split it up? Be mature about it, because bear in mind you are going to be, especially if it's your first time flat sharing. You're at uni now. You're not living at home with your parents. So it's okay to have flat meetings and have a mature chat about it. And also, when you have those flat meetings, I am going to say this: if someone says something that you don't like, don't take it personally. That's just someone trying to make the environment that you're living in a bit better. Okay, just take it on board and digest it, and then say your piece. Moving out, this I said was one of the most important pieces or important parts of your flat sharing experience. Why? Because you need to check the inventory. If the inventory is missing anything, let's say there's damage from the inventory that wasn't on there before, the deposit's going to be tapped into. That's what I would say. So you need to make sure you check the inventory. If there's anything there that, say, like there's damages like scuff marks, etc., around the house, and don't get me wrong, wear and tear, it happens. You look around and you notice there's stuff there, just repair the damages. That's not a problem. You can repair any damages, and then make sure you clean everything thoroughly. Do not get together with your mates and just get some sponges and say, all right, let's clean this together, because we all know our mates. We're not the best cleaners in the world, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself. Not the best cleaner in the world. All chip in and get a little cleaning company in to clean it. A reputable cleaning company to come in. Sometimes it's not even that expensive. Just get someone in, chuck a bit of money in each, and get them to do it professionally, because at least then it's getting done properly. And cleaning companies have lots of experience of doing end of tenancy cleans. They have lots of experience of it. And one of my friends who actually runs a cleaning company has dealt with so many inventories. He actually wants to go in to make sure that the tenant leaves the place without having their deposit tapped into. Like, you actually find it's amazing. Some cleaning companies want to make sure they leave it really good for you because it's in their interest to make sure that you have a positive end to your stay. So get a cleaning company in. Take photos of any evidence, or take photos of the evidence before you leave, because what you do not want is the landlord or the agents come in and say, oh, I came in and this was a state or this was happening. If you've got photos, you can use evidence to say, well, actually, this was how it was when I left it. You'll find when you take pictures, the date and the time will be on there, and you can use that as relevant evidence. Finally, remember, the landlord and the agent can only deduct expenses from your inventory with the right evidence. So they can't just come in and say, oh, well, actually, I saw the shower head wasn't working properly, and therefore we're deducting the evidence. They need the expenses. They need to show evidence for that. Okay. Likewise, you need to show evidence to show that if you've got a problem in there, it's all about the evidence. That's why smartphones are so great. We're down to the last few slides. I've realised I've been talking a lot here, but I just want to talk to you quickly about the simple things that people usually forget. And then I'm going to just give you a few questions to think about as I wrap up this presentation. But the things that people usually forget are the things such as forgetting to hoover at the end. I hoover like mad because I hate it. And like I say, it happens, but I hate when the agent gives me that 24-hour notice call and say, we're going to come in tomorrow just to make sure everything's okay. And I hoover like mad because I just hate the fact I get a lot of dust in my flat. And I hate it when they come in there and it's just looking a bit messy, because I always think then, I don't want to put words in my agent's mouth, but I always worry that they're thinking, oh God, this isn't being well looked after. The landlord can hire a cleaning company to do a deep clean, and that can cost hundreds. So like I said earlier, you and your mates can put a little bit of money in each, get a cleaning company in. But at least you're sourcing the cleaning company. The landlord, when they find out they can get a cleaning company, could just turn around and say, do you know what's the most expensive one going? And I'll get that and I'll deduct the deposit. You can do it yourselves. You can do the cleaning yourselves. So say, for example, you've actually said, you see to your friends, let's all chip in, and you can't all afford to chip in. You can clean yourself. That's not a problem. But make sure when you clean yourself, you do it properly, and you make sure you're there for each other when you're cleaning, and make sure that everything's spotless. When they go and clean, say for example a landlord wants to go and clean them for themselves as well, they can actually deduct their travel, so that includes a taxi fare. So let's say for example my flat, I've left it a complete state. My landlord then turns around and says, well, do you know what, I'm going to tell Mike that I'm taking half a day off work, and I'm going to go and travel a taxi fare that cost 50-60 quid. And the loss of earnings that I've taken from my job on the day off was about another 50-60 quid. So I'm going to charge Mike 120, 150 quid, because I'm also going to put some more on top of that because of the amount of time it's taken for me and to clean and etc. etc. It gets messy. So all that because you didn't hoover at the end. I know what I'd rather do. They can also actually say, I had to have lunch, so my lunch, that was 20 quid. The only place I could go to was a 20 quid restaurant, so that cost me 20 quid. So let's charge Mike another 20 quid. And also I'm going to charge him cost of products as well. I had to use some really expensive top drawer products to make sure that I cleaned up after his mess. And again, like I say, you can avoid all of that by simply making sure that you clean properly, and either get a company in who are charging a reasonable amount, or make sure that you hoover at the end and clean properly with your friends. The other thing, forgetting to replace breakages. It happens. We break things. I broke something last week. It happens to everybody. If you break something, go and replace it yourself. you can actually go down to Poundland and you probably end up getting something that's a reasonable quality that could be an easy replacement. Again, if you smash something and say, oh, do you know what, it's all right, the landlord will go and pay for it. What was it? Must have only been worth a £5. Haha, that's probably not going to happen. The landlord can replace it themselves. Again, Mike, I had to take the taxi fare all the way down to the local IKEAs. Not to say that all landlords go to IKEA, but let's say you went to IKEA. Went into IKEA, that was another half day off work, Mike. So that 50 quid I charged you for half a day of cleaning, well, I'm going to charge you the other half a day now. That's going to cost you 100 quid. Oh, and then I had to stop off at IKEA and get some IKEA Swedish meatballs, but, you know, they were charging them extra price that day, so that's going to cost you more. And then after that, the cost of the mugs in IKEA, they've gone up. They've shot right up, Mike. So in the end, Mike and me, I ended up having to pay about 300 odd quid. All because I didn't go down to Poundland and get £1 worth of mugs to cover the ones that I broke. Anyway, rant over. Let's discuss. This is the moment where I want you to actually just stop, have another little think. If you're actually watching this with someone else, and I hope you are actually, maybe it's your future flatmate, turn to each other now and think about what is your responsibilities and what's the responsibility of your landlord. Okay, if you don't know that off the top of your head now, rewind, have a little look at what I've just said, note it down, make sure you are fully aware of what your landlord's responsibilities are. So what are your versus the landlord's responsibilities? You need to make sure that you know that. If you don't, go back and watch it. What is a guarantor? Remember what I said? Rewind if you don't know, or Wikipedia it. Go on Wikipedia and find it. Sometimes I just finding out what these words mean myself means that I remember them much better than just listening to Ed or listening to Mike. But find out what a guarantor is. And who would your guarantor be, actually? Have a little think about that. Who is your guarantor? What's an inventory? I've mentioned it a few times. The most important thing, the inventory. That's the bit that gets my heart raising. The inventory when I have to rent a place. What is it? What can I do about it? And then once you've done that, it says here get into groups of 5. Obviously, there's only 2 of you doing this. You can do this by yourselves. If you're by yourself watching this, have a little think about this. Write it down. And then I would actually suggest going and talking to a teacher about it, actually. Or you can even message us, and I'll show you how you can do that a little bit later on. But have a little think about what do you want to do before moving in? Get the money together. Remember what I said earlier. Make sure you got all that money together. But anyway, that's the only hint I'm going to give you there. What are you going to do before moving in? What are the possible problems? What's the potential problems coping with flatmates? How are you going to cope with flatmates? What are you going to do? What's the process of moving out? And then once you've done that, present it to a teacher, friend, could be to us, could be to whoever, mum or dad. Do that, and then that's a great exercise to see if you've understood everything that we've covered. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry if I went on a little bit there, but I hope that you have a little bit more of an understanding of flat sharing. If you want any more resources, www.wiseupfinancialeducation.co.uk. We have a QR code here where you can give some feedback, I believe, but scan the QR code and that will take you through to one of our resources that you can give some feedback on. And also, if you have any questions regarding this, you can actually email me at mike at wiseupfinancialeducation.co.uk. I'll say that again because I made a mistake just a second ago. It is Mike, M-I-K-E, at wiseupfinancialeducation.co.uk, and I will happily answer any questions that you have. You might even want to tell me some of the things that you've decided after looking at that exercise. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening, and wishing you all the very best when it comes to your flat sharing experiences.